Hi, and welcome to our case study on fixed assets optimization and how we were able to release $751,000 from the fixed assets of an equipment manufacturing company. Let's jump right into it. So the company had been in business for 4 years. They had $2 million in fixed assets. They had a good cash position, but it was not optimized. They were looking for growth without outside funding. They didn't want to get into a long-term debt or long-term loan. They did want to keep using their lines of credit and their credit cards, but they didn't want to get into a bigger loan. And more important than all, they didn't want to give away ownership of their company and sell a part of it in order to get that money for growth. And one of the first phrases I heard was, "No rocks have been left unturned." And I pretty much confirmed that. The company had optimized their cash flow, their margins, their working capital, but fixed assets remained as a source of potential value that the company could tap into in order to collect that money, perform a sale leaseback, and then invest that money for growth. So what did we do? We ran a 100% free diagnostic of their fixed assets. And what did we find? Well, first of all, they had a low return on assets. They had a big amount of assets, $2 million. And the returns were not allowing them to extend their line of credit, or LOC, because banks that provide these lines of credit require certain metrics, including the return on assets, to provide a line of credit. There was no asset tracking, so this led to underutilized equipment. If you're not tracking how much you're using your assets, there's going to be some equipment that might be forgotten somewhere in the shop that's not being used. There was no cost of ownership analysis, which led to a very expensive way of owning equipment. Most of the equipment was bought whenever it was needed, but there was no proper plan to see how much of that equipment was going to be used. There was no CapEx planning either for increasing the capacity of the company or replacing the current equipment, which led to very reactive investments and maintenance, which, as you guys might know, it costs a lot more than preventative maintenance. Finally, there were no life cycle management of the assets, which led to 4 plant stops in 6 months. So what was the first thing we mentioned to them? You don't need to own all of your assets. There are certain criteria where it's definitely needed for you to own your assets. If you have a proprietary technology or a specific layout that makes you unique or makes you produce more or faster, then ideally you want to own that so that there's no visibility of how you have assembled your factory or your shop. But in other cases, if you have standalone assets that you could lease that are outside of proprietary or compliance related constraints, then you can lease those. So here's a list. If you like, you can pause and check out the details of the list. But this is the list that I provided to them, explaining that these are the roughly some of the criteria that you could use for making the decision to whether if you want to own an asset or you want to lease it. And for this company, we particularly focused on 4 different factors. The first one was the customization needs. There was no need for some assets that the company had to be customized. They were standalone. That makes them also very easy to lease or to sell and then lease back. There was no competitive advantage on some of that equipment, because they were like standalone CNC machines, grinding machines, and 3D printers that were not integrated to the rest of the shop. They were looking for growth, so this is a great way to protect your cash and use that sale of the assets to fund your growth. Granted, you'll have to pay monthly lease payments, but it's going to allow you to get a lot of money up front. And then if you expect your growth to be faster than or happen before you finish making your payments, then this makes sense. And then one of the key things for them is, since the plant had stopped 4 times, they wanted to get professional type guidance on how to do it. And we actually included this in the agreement where the lessor would need to train us and teach us every time they run the preventative maintenance so that when the company was ready to buy the assets and own the assets, they could have a good set of criteria. Now, with that, they could also apply that same criteria to other equipment that they decided to own. This was just a good perk that was negotiated for them on the sale leaseback. So we found that out of the $2,670,000 of fixed assets could be sold and leased back. And we also found that there were $98,000 of non-productive fixed assets. There were assets that were used early on or were used for prototyping specific type of product, but then their use was discontinued. So this was money that was sitting there. Imagine that, $98,000 sitting in the shop, nobody's using them, and it has a market value. So in our desire to help this company unlock money out of their fixed assets, we started an asset tracking and started reporting asset utilization, which brought visibility, right? We ran a cost of ownership analysis, and now the company knew how much it cost them to own the equipment. Now, as you can imagine, if you have a very productive equipment, you reduce the cost of ownership because it's producing money. And if you're using it just a little bit, it doesn't really make sense to own it. You might as well lease it, even for a partial period of time. So after we ran our implementation, the company gained clarity in terms of numbers. How much does it cost me to operate this equipment? The lifecycle management, we created a control system with the help of the lessor. And now there was continuity in the business. There were no planned stops. The company didn't just learn how to run the preventative maintenance for the leased equipment, but they used the same criteria. And obviously you can ask a couple of extra questions to the technician to learn a little bit more about how to maintain other equipment. CapEx planning started to take place. So there was a maintenance and a quarterly plan. So companies started performing preventative maintenance with the lessons learned. This saved $78,000 of projected planned stops. The company, whenever the equipment was maintained after it stopped, there was always a caveat from the technician saying, you actually need to overhaul this equipment. This needs to happen regularly. The company did not have that plan in place. So when you incorporate that, you get rid of those urgent calls at 10 p.m. asking for a technician to come to your plant, and they're going to charge you probably an extra fee for the time and the urgency. So the net effect of the sale leaseback was $595,000, and the sale of non-productive assets, the net effect proceeds, $78,000 for a financial cash flow of $751,000. I'm gonna explain why I'm showing the net value here. It's really quick. The $78,000 are coming from having this preventative maintenance and CapEx planning. So basically, you did not incur in these costs that you were going to incur no matter what. According to the technician, that's how much money it will have cost to perform these resuscitation attempts on the equipment if it was not properly maintained. The sale leaseback, as we mentioned, we had found $670,000 of assets that could be sold and leased back, but there's a charge. So there's a lifetime cost to that of $75,000. So that's where the net effect, and that's where we get the $595,000. The sale of non-productive assets, it's categorized as other income. So there is taxes that apply to it. Taxes in this case were $20,000, and that nets us $751,000 unlocked from a $2 million fixed asset company. Now, if you would be interested in having this type of service performed for you, we run a completely free audit that you get to keep. You get to keep all the insights and comments from the audit. And if you'd like us to implement it, we run a 90-day implementation that has no upfront costs because we only charge our clients based on the results that we provide them. So if we don't get any results for you, you don't pay a dime. So if you're interested in this type of service for your business, feel free to schedule a call. We look forward to hearing from you and have a great rest of your day.